Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Coach's Corner. We are going into our third week of our Spring 2018 ELC, and this week's topics deal with communication. So let's talk a little bit more about the role of coaches and how we can be great communicators. Let's first talk a little bit about student communication. Why is student communication important? Without proper communication with students, coaches can't build or nurture the relationships that are required for learning. In her famous TED Talk, educator Rita Pierson says, "Kids don't learn from people they don't like." And when we think back to our own examples in school, where we had teachers that maybe weren't the greatest teachers, we usually didn't do quite as well in their classes. Or maybe we did, but we did so begrudgingly. It's important to build strong relationships with students, and maybe they won't always like us, but by being warm and open and friendly, we can encourage students to build connections with us in order to do better in our classes. Student communication is important not only in the coaching classroom, but outside of the coaching classroom. As coaches, we're required to send different pieces of student communication, which I'll go over in a minute, but some general guidelines are here that we'll want to remember. We always want to send student communications in a timely fashion. So for example, if a student misses both of their coaching sessions, we'll want to make sure that we're sending those communications fairly soon after they miss their sessions in order to get them engaged with us and understand that they need to attend makeups in order to help their scores. Coaches also need to be familiar with what they are required to do in terms of student communication. And finally, we want to always keep student communication in Canvas and Adobe Connect. So never use email, text, or phone calls in order to communicate with a student. For the next part, let's take a look at the requirements for coaches in terms of what they're required to send to students for their communication. So students need to make sure that they know who their coach is and when they have coaching. So we ask coaches to send welcome messages to students, preferably as soon as they receive their coaching assignments, in order to welcome the students to coaching and explain a little bit about what coaching is, what time they have it, what days they have it, and what will be required of them for going to their coaching sessions. Then we also ask for the coaches to notify students of how they're doing. I need to scroll down a little bit. I'll do this slowly to not make anyone dizzy. But in the part of the rubric for our spot check, we have a bit about the messages to students and their communication. So in addition to the welcome messages, we also ask students to message all students roughly 2 to 3 weeks after the start of coaching and to let the students know how they're doing in general. We want to make sure that there's a lot of positive feedback in here. But if the student's struggling with some things, we also want to put in some pointers and ways that they can continue to improve. This helps us build the connection with the students and let them know that we really care about them. Also, if students are not attending and they miss both of their sessions within a week, the coach is also asked to send a message to that student in order to notify them that they missed both of their sessions and that they were missed and that they'll need to make up. In order to effectively communicate with our students, I created a SMORE newsletter full of templates to help you come up with effective ways to message the students. For example, here's a sample feedback message. Basically, we want to tell the students about what they're doing well and let them know that you appreciate their efforts, and then list things that they're doing well on and maybe not so well on in the message. And this template's really useful to help you do that effectively. If I have a student who's missing coaching, I can use this template. Again, just copy and paste that into a Canvas message and just fill in where there are these little stars here in order to personalize it for the students. And then finally down here I have a welcome message. This is a little bit longer, takes a little bit longer to fill in, but we only ask coaches to send these out once at the beginning of the semester. And students are often really confused and not sure about how to do coaching. And I find that ever since I started sending these messages out to students, that it's really cut down on a lot of confusion and they feel a lot more comfortable going to coaching. And it's a great way to initially start off and build the connection and act as an icebreaker. So in this, we have things about what students have to do to prepare, that we expect the students are going to be active participants, and then there are some guides in here that explain how to go to coaching. So now that we've discussed effective student communication, let's talk about internal communications that we need to do with our colleagues at NCVPS in order to be successful as coaches. Be sure that you're updating the coaching attendance daily. Coaches are required to update the attendance spreadsheets daily, since teachers need to use this information to help them monitor student progress and intervene when necessary. It can also be helpful to leave comments for teachers on how students performed and address any concerns you might have in the document. This is a sample of the Japanese conversation coaching attendance document that we created a few years ago. And I know that not all departments use a tool that's quite as robust, but we've had a lot of success with it. And I wanted to show everybody some examples. So basically what we do is we have an entire section for a teacher would be listed in each individual tab. And then the students would be here. We don't use the full last name here. We just put the first name and then last initial, the name of the coach. And then we have the coach go through and take a look at this rubric that we have based on student participation and their performance. So we have different categories like attendance, where we put down if the student was there on time or if they left early or arrived late. We have categories on participation. We talk a little bit about how the student did overall, if they participated actively or they seem withdrawn from the class. Conversation, we talk a little bit about overall fluency, so if they're using complete sentences or if they're struggling or making errors. We would want to note that here. And the coaching concepts, we gauge how well the students seem to understand the concepts. So if they knew about 80 to 100%, we give them a full mark. For example, if they would get into coaching though and know less than 25% of the grammar and vocabulary, we would give them a low mark. And then finally, in this last piece, we can give some general comments about how the student did. So for example, if the student did well, but maybe needs help with vocab, we would put it here. Or maybe in the following session, the student really struggled with the pronunciation and reading new characters. And if the coach felt that the student wasn't prepared, it's easy to put that there. And then one of the nice things about this format is that it allows us to have an automatically scored grade here that the teacher can basically just key in manually into the grade book. What is nice about this format is that if a coach has a concern about a student or wants to address something with a teacher, this is an easy way to do that without having to pull up another email. Usually when coaches have concerns, they're just small things that can usually be addressed through a comment. Another way coaches should keep up with internal communication is by checking the NCVPS email account assigned to each coach daily during the school week. Coaches are expected to read all of their messages and respond within 24 hours if needed. And this includes messages that are sent from me, from different teachers, and also from NCVPS leadership. Make sure that you're also updating the coach's update document when those updates come out by reading all the updates and highlighting your name. So every once in a while, I will send out an email communication notifying coaches that there's a new update in this document, the Conversation Coaches Updates for the 2017-2018 school year. And you'll see that there is a new date with a title for each update. And then down at the bottom, there'll be a section that says read by, and then coaches are asked to highlight their names whenever they are done. A good way to do this if you're behind is to use Control F, and that will create a box that will come up to find your name in the document. Just type your name in that box, and then it will show you all the places that your name appears. So you can just go through and highlight those as needed. But please make sure you're reading these updates very carefully and taking care of all of the action items. I like to outline if there are action items to complete, just to make sure it's a little bit easier for people to keep track of everything they need to do. Another really important thing coaches need to do is to make sure that they're being active participants in the ELC. Our ELC is a requirement for not only all NCVPS coaches, but also all NCVPS teachers. In order to continue to invest in the professional development of the educators at NCVPS, our organization organizes these ELCs in order to continue to help us progress and evolve as educators. The purpose of the ELC is to engage educators in professional development in order to continue to grow and improve as professionals. Teachers and coaches must be active participants in order to benefit from the ELC. So it's one thing to go through and read the material and maybe watch the videos, but it's another thing entirely to make sure that we're being active participants and being involved in the conversations. So please make sure that you are actively participating. This is also a requirement in order to be assigned future students in future semesters. While it is very difficult to have everybody meet synchronously in one space and one time, we do ask that coaches make their very best efforts to attend and participate in live meetings whenever possible. So we ask the coaches to attend unless a true scheduling conflict arises. For example, if you have a coaching session during a scheduled meeting, you obviously wouldn't be able to be a live participant. But it might be possible that you would just have to maybe miss the first 15 minutes of it, for example, at a meeting that starts at 8:30. And then let's say that you have a coaching session that ends at 8:45. So you would be expected to attend the meeting at 8:45 if at all possible. If the coach cannot attend live, the coach is expected to watch the archive in its entirety and to contact the host or the IL to let them know if they have any questions or concerns after watching the presentation. And then finally, a 3-2-1 reflection would also be required for that. Coaches are expected to also own their coaching portfolios. The portfolio is an important tool to use in order to document your journey as an educator with NCVPS. It should be used often in order to monitor your progress as a coach and document things that you learn in the department meetings. Portfolios are expected to be kept up to date, and coaches who do not update their portfolios regularly will not receive students to coach for future semesters. Tabs must be up to date, including your mentoring tab as well as your walkthrough tabs. After you receive your walkthrough feedback, it's expected that you'll go through each line item and either initial and date or leave a comment about your thoughts and reflections. Another thing coaches should be mindful of is completing 3-2-1 reflections on your mentoring tab on your portfolio on a regular basis. These need to be completed regardless of whether or not you attended the meeting live, and they consist of 3 things you learned, 2 things you plan to implement, and 1 question. Always make sure that you ask a question even if it doesn't have anything to do with the presentation. It could be something more personal in order to get to know a little bit more about your IL or LN. These should be sent to your subject area IL as well as LN Heart, and they should be completed no later than 72 hours after the meeting occurs. So if you didn't attend the meeting live, please make sure that you listen to the archive in a timely manner and submit your 3-2-1 reflection 72 hours after the meeting. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, please contact me. My email address is there, and I look forward to working with you during this week's ELC, and thank you very much for your active participation.